Kathleen, I'm going to give you back host permission. I think you can't do it since you're not host,
Okay.
if that makes sense. Like you can't make people co-host unless you're
Okay.
host. So,
All right.
okay. So, and make sure to give me back co-host permission as well.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Does anybody know if Chris Meyer had said she was available for this?
Mayor, this is Thomas. The last I heard, I had a chat with her earlier today and she said she was going to make it.
Okay.
She had a
Oh, wait, no.
some sort of a biking event or a dedication of a trail or something, I think. She might be running a few minutes late.
Well, I don't, this is already an extra meeting and it's past 6, so I'm going to kick it off and then we'll hopefully we'll acknowledge her. Oh, there she is. Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. Somebody needs to let Chris in. She's in the waiting room. Captain. This is a special meeting of the Hideout Town Council, special meeting public hearing of the Hideout Town Council. It's February 8th, 2022. We'll call the meeting to order. And sorry, I'm going to sneeze. And then remind everybody that this is an electronic meeting. There will be no, there's no anchor site because of, although improving, continued issues around COVID. I'll do a roll call. Ralph Severini. Here. Sherry Jacobs.
Here.
Thank you. Carol Hazelton.
She's here.
I need her to say that. Carol? You have to come off mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Ken, thank you.
Okay, I
You're
was
here.
completely muted.
That's what happens when you, everybody gets muted when you log in. You have to unmute yourself.
I tried many times. Sorry.
Okay, well, you're got it now. Thank you.
Okay.
Chris Byron.
I'm here.
Thank you. Okay. We'll start with the public hearing items. The first is a summary of the visit to the Boulders at Hideout project held on February 21st. I don't know, Thomas, were you going to do that? Who's going to do that?
I may have to turn that over to somebody that was there. I actually wasn't at the site visit.
I think
And none
Chris
of the
was,
council were at the site.
wasn't Chris
To the
there?
best of my knowledge.
Alicia, do you know who went?
Yeah, Chris was there. I gave her the heads up that she was gonna present that.
Or did you have a
okay.
quorum of the council there?
Yes,
We
we did.
did. Yes, we did.
Okay, cool.
All right. I finally got off mute and got my camera to work, so I'm set. Yeah, Alicia, what was the date? That's the fun thing. The date we were there.
That was February 21st.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we met there late that afternoon. It was myself, Carol, Ralph, Sherry, and Alicia. We met up with McKay Christensen and Todd Embry, as well as one other gentleman whose name I did not write down. So, Alicia, I don't know if you caught his name. He seemed to be our house host that day.
Well,
And
that
so-
probably was
That was Murray.
Todd and
That was Murray Gar.
Murray.
Yeah, that was Murray.
That was
He's
Murray.
the realtor.
Thank you. Okay, so he seemed to be in charge, keeping the time for us. So we were there for approximately an hour and had an opportunity to go inside the existing home and take a look. I think all of us had been there at one time or other before that, so it was not our first time, anybody's first time there. We had an opportunity to listen to McKay primarily, with Todd adding some information, present their concept plan and talk through it with us. We asked a few questions, questions about density, about hotels, the hotelier that they were trying to get, possibly to have interest in that property. We had some discussion about commercial, the value of commercial real estate, the value to the town. And we also talked a little bit, without looking at any materials in front of us, we just talked conceptually about the financial analysis that they had prepared. And that was more or less the extent of what we covered while we were there. So the council members got a chance to ask questions to McKay and Todd, which is what our purpose was for being there.
Okay, thank you,
Really,
Chris.
wasn't just to, that's good that you were able, really the idea of the site visit is to get situated to actually look at the site, and then any questions. Well, it's good that you're saying it here, but the idea is that any discussion really happens in the meeting. So the site visit is just more to view the site, as you said, look at the layout, that type of thing.
Yeah, actually, absolutely. As a council members, we didn't discuss anything amongst ourselves. We just had an opportunity to each ask questions and listen to those questions that we were each asking. And it really was to see the site. Fortunately, we were pretty worried it was going to snow that day, but it didn't. So it was, like I said, not the first time we had been there. So we had an opportunity to look around on other days, but it was, daylight, and we drove up the drive in separate cars, and that's what happened.
Thank you, Chris. I moved a little too quickly. I just need to go back and for the record state that Bob Nadelberg is also a council member, but he's excused as he's traveling.
Oh, okay. That's for this meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Bob was also not present at the site visit either. He was unavailable that day.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So then we'll jump to, I don't know, for that summary, Polly, do I need to open that for questions to the public, or?
No, it's just to let people know, since site visits aren't recorded and there are no minutes to them, it's just a way to make sure that just to memorialize what happened on site.
Okay, thank you. So the next item is a potential ordinance amending the town zoning map to rezone the parcels at the Boulders Hideout for mountain zone and neighborhood mixed use, R20, R6, and R3. I'm going to turn this over to Thomas.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor.
And you'll have you take us through your review. The other thing I think you should share to the council, if you haven't seen it, is we did have a recommendation with caveats from the planning commission, which I think all of those should show up in here as well, right?
Correct, they are. Yep.
Okay, just so everybody knows. So this has been to the planning commission. It was discussed several times, and they moved it forward with some specific conditions that Thomas will talk about.
Great.
And I'll scroll when you want me to, Thomas. Just give me the word.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe I guess what I'll do is give you guys a quick overview, I guess, walk you through this report, which kind of outlines some of the discussion issues and points made during the Planning Commission's couple of meetings as they got to review this. If you have any questions as I go through this, don't hesitate to stop me, but I may go through it somewhat quickly. And then if you do have questions, let me know.
Can I stop for
Sure.
a second, Thomas? I'd like to make a request that you don't go too quickly. Just for the record, we received this last night, this whole packet, and I, for one, had a lot of difficulty getting through everything in the short amount of time that we had. So I would really appreciate
Okay.
if you would not rush through it.
Okay, I'm fine to do that. And I just want to make sure that I leave some time for McKay and Todd to convey, their vision for this plan as well. Because of course, my take on this as a staff report is kind of somewhat technical / formal. So I won't go quickly. I'll walk you through everything that we have in here if you guys are comfortable with that.
Thank you. Unless other council members have differing opinions, but I assume everyone had similar challenges trying to read the packet in the extremely limited time that we had.
Okay, so basically the map you see in front of you, you can see the overlay of the 112 acre area that is the discussion for the proposed concept plan and rezone. As I take you through the staff report, it is worth noting that the Planning Commission reviewed this pursuant to two applications. One was the concept plan, and that is a kind of a way for an applicant to be able to get in front of the Planning Commission, present what their overall ideas are without having too much detail. And so the applicants did that, and the Planning Commission did review that and approve it. That is not something that ultimately comes to the council for review and approval. That's just something that is done by the Planning Commission if an applicant requests it, and it helps get them to the next level for, say, a preliminary plat. So that won't be before you tonight. Tonight is, as noted on the agenda, the review for the rezone request. So if, Mayor, if you don't mind scrolling up to the next page, you'll see here a bit of an outline for site characteristics. It's 112 acres. The current zoning is mountain zoning, which is 1 unit per acre. Probably would be about 85 to maybe 100 units, depending on how much space infrastructure takes up in the 112 acres. The proposed density per the concept plan that was presented is for about 610 units. Kind of think of that as 610 keys, right? That's the number of actual units that could be built. Some of those are hotel rooms, proposed to be hotel rooms. Some are condos, some are villas, some are casitas, some are single family units on larger lots. But the ERUs, which is our density calculation, is 577 as proposed. Again, in addition to the housing ladder, and it is a pretty good housing ladder. There's a nice variety of housing proposed. They're also proposing to retrofit the existing house that you all visited as a bed and breakfast, and then build a hotel just a little bit to the northwest of there. And they've also proposed a small retail pad. If you scroll up just a little bit, Mayor, you can see, I don't know how well you all can read it. I don't have annotation capacity. Let me see. I don't for some reason, but yep, you can see there, the purple is the hotel. You can see a little retail pad proposed 2,500 to 4,000 square feet. And then of course you can see the clubhouse. And then just south of that is the B&B, the bed and breakfast right there. And then there's a little area down there below the pond that is an area that's reserved for food carts and potential kinds of meeting opportunities, festival opportunities in that area. If you, you know what, you guys could stay there on the map if you want. Otherwise, I'm going to the next page, Mayor. The discussions with the Planning Commission were relative to density and uses primarily. And so it's a significant density increase request. It's about 500%. And so as the Planning Commission looked at it, they wanted some understanding of how this compares to some of the more recent subdivisions that you all have reviewed and approved. You can see a comparison for Deer Springs and Lakeview. This would be more dense than them at about 5.35 units per acre. Deer Springs was around 2.57 units per acre. You can see Lakeview at 3.08. It is worth noting that a significant amount of this density is within individual rooms, single room occupancy, say a hotel room and or bed and breakfast room. 170 of the units are actually contained within there. So a lot of that density gets absorbed into those couple of buildings. So it would leave about 400-ish units of residential outside of those two structures.
So Thomas, how much acreage is devoted to the hotel and B&B side of it versus the balance of the 100 acres or so that's here?
You know, you've probably got, maybe McKay or Todd know the answer to this question, but if I were just kind of eyeballing it on the plan, I'd say you probably got maybe 25, 30-ish acres, not including the pond necessarily. But McKay, jump in, I'm guessing.
Yeah, we have 50% of our density is on, so over 300 units is on a total of how many acres? Probably 13. I would say you're probably on maybe 20 acres or so.
That looks about right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a lot of that density is older.
You said how many units are on that 20 acres?
You've got the 150 key hotel plus 100. What do we have? 140 units in the condos. Plus we have 20 in the B&B. Plus we have an additional, I want to say 10 to 15. I don't have that actual number right in front of me in the mixed use building. And so all of that is in that kind of high density core area. And that's all on roughly 20 acres.
So the balance being, we'll call this 300.
Yeah, you have about 300. Yeah, 300 units ERUs on.
300. Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
So
sorry,
balance,
70 acres maybe.
You got
balance
about 300 units on 95 acres, and you got almost 300 units on 20 acres between the condos and the hotel and the B&B.
But I think it's important that the council understands that distinction. So it's going to be, you know, the hotel nightly rental type areas are high density purposefully, and then the residential areas are much more aligned with our density specs.
Yeah, our density on the single family and the traditional for sale detached is about 3.15 units per acre.
Sorry, Thomas,
Yeah.
I just wanted to get that clear.
You're good. Any other questions there? If not, I'll kind of walk through a little bit of the planning commission. And there were some concerns about the density, some requests for reductions in density. The applicants noted that, to make a profit by doing commercial development, say for a hotel and some of the other components that are a part of this concept plan, you really need the balance of some of that residential. And so there was some discussion back and forth, and ultimately the planning commission kind of moved into a discussion about kind of this give get with regard to commercial and residential. The applicants noted that they are providing the hotel, the B&B. There will be a clubhouse, and then the commercial that you see in front of you is also proposed, a hotel restaurant, a bed and breakfast restaurant, both at 4,000 square feet, give or take, a coffee shop, part of the clubhouse, and then some sundries, kind of a shop in the clubhouse as well. So there was a little bit of commercial up there. The applicants also did provide the retail pad, that kind of small retail pad you saw, 2,500 to 4,000 square feet. They did add that in after the fact, and that is kind of just a little bit to the northeast of the hotel. There were some discussions with regard to the town center, kind of coming back to the 2019 general plan, where the community was very much where they were in alignment with regard to some desires for kind of those third places, those intimate commercial places, those places where you can get coffee, a bar, a couple of restaurants, kind of a clustering of those, if you will. And that discussion kind of went back and forth, and the idea that was put forth early on in the planning commission process was maybe to reserve a few acres that the town and or the applicants could really kind of market as opportunities for commercial. Commercial is something you almost have to give away as you start a development of a town center or a neighborhood commercial development area. Ultimately, I think the applicants were less comfortable with reserving some land for future kind of town center commercial, and a little bit more receptive to discussing ideas of first floor commercial, maybe in what they call the big house condos, maybe putting some mixed use in those condos, which is also a pretty good idea because the space, the structure is already there. Excuse me. You could carve out a little bit of the podium, the first floor podium parking, or the first floor parking, maybe get some small retail. By retail, I shouldn't say that. I should say it's probably more restaurant or bar or takeaway food kind of space in there. So that discussion took place with the planning commission, and they made a couple of recommendations with regard to either one of those as opportunities. I don't know if we want to get into that discussion now, but basically what the planning commission was really looking for was kind of that specialty restaurant, specialty retail, intimate commercial, I guess you'd call it. So there's a few bullets there that kind of outline in a little bit more detail what I just enunciated.
I'd like to just jump in here. There are discussions going on with some other developers for other places in town where this town center concept, I think, makes more sense. They're closer to 248 and not up in the middle of a residential neighborhood. We've got two different possibilities emerging. So I'm personally less concerned that this is going to be a residential hotel complex. It'll have the things that you'd expect to see in a residential and hotel type complex. You would expect to find a restaurant and maybe a pub and some associated retail in support of the sports complex and so forth, like you would if you went to a Sundance. You wouldn't necessarily find a 7-Eleven or a whatever. You'd find more of a Deer Valley Cafe type of thing up there. So just so the council knows, I'm Jen and I and others, Thomas, were working on some other concepts where some of these other things come forward, but it just doesn't necessarily seem to me to be this it seemed like we were forcing it up there.
All right, Mayor, since you brought that up, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Since you're implying that there's some other discussions going on that the council isn't aware of, at least I'm not aware of, are those discussions also involving asking the council to rezone an area?
I don't know we're that far yet, Chris, but yes, certainly it would require rezoning.
Okay, so it's already
These are-
existing.
These are preliminary discussions. They haven't, there's no application, so bringing them to council is, it's just doesn't seem appropriate since we don't actually have, anybody coming forward with that final saying, here's what I'd like to do here. But yeah, they would definitely require some rezoning.
Okay, so
I mean, everything we've got left is mountain.
sorry, did you finish, Mayor?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, the reason I asked that is, we can only consider what's in front of us, right? As you're saying.
Right.
However, so not knowing what might be coming forward or might be in the works or might be, on somebody's radar somewhere, we can only try to be thinking in terms of meeting, the 2019 general plan guidance. And, so I think it's very appropriate for the council to be asking about what about town center, et cetera, and the things that are part of the general plan, which I'll get to later when, we have our chance to discuss. But so I would beg to differ that it may be this, the topography in this particular parcel is challenging. I know I've been up there. It's a steep hill to get up to that existing house. And then when we get to the engineering report, I guess we can talk more about that. But I think it's completely appropriate for the council to want to ask those questions about town center, et cetera. So.
I'm not suggesting you shouldn't ask them. I'm just suggesting that, these guys are going to present a concept, and, for it to work as a concept, you need to understand, they're part of the story and say, okay, if you're building a hotel, short stay kind of environment, do you want a grocery store next door? And how does that help? How does that help or hinder their ability to keep that place at the appropriate occupancy? That's all I'm pointing out.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you.
So, thanks for that, Mayor. Yeah, there's a table that kind of outlines the proposed space, some of the indoor amenities, what would be in the clubhouse, the fitness center, et cetera. And then you again see some outdoor amenities. Areas, square footages aren't yet defined. It is a concept plan. And so we just wanted to make sure that you had an understanding of some of the amenities that were being provided. Along that line was a discussion about connectivity, trails, and parks. And so if we were to go back to the proposed concept plan, you would see that there is a pretty large park area kind of proposed on the east side of the site, kind of as almost as the centerpiece of some of that residential over there. And one of the discussions that the Planning Commission had was, how do we make sure that town is connected so that everybody up there has access to the south side or the east side, depending which corner you're coming around, which curve you're coming around on SR 248. And so, yep, you can see there the proposed kind of park in the middle there with some activity space. And the discussion went to the issue of an underpass, which has also been discussed not only as part of the general plan, but certainly the Parks, Open Space and Trail Committee. And are there any opportunities to help get safe connectivity? There were some discussions regarding cost. It's a significant cost. We all know that, right? It's probably $5 million to get an underpass under 248. And we're not even sure exactly where would be the best location. It certainly depends on topography. It may not be in this location. It might be further up, a little bit on the northern end of the community. But the back and forth with the Planning Commission and the applicants, and you guys feel free to jump in, was what about an opportunity if we give on some of the density for the rezone request? Maybe there could be a payment made to the town for maybe half or all of the cost of a future underpass. I think that generally the Planning Commission landed on maybe half the cost, 2.5 million, maybe $500,000 payments over the course of 5 years. So that was one of the discussions. And that, again, that's centered on making sure that trails in the proposed Boulders development could connect to the trails, not only up in, Golden Eagle and Soaring Hawk, but to get folks across the road. And for those of you that were involved in the Parks Open Space and Trail Plan, maybe to connect to that spine, that separated path along 248 that we are working toward. Any questions there?
Well, it'd be a great idea to have some connectivity to the town, Thomas. I think we talked about that, but I didn't realize it was going to cost 5 million. So is there a partnership approach? Could we get some other partners in here, so to speak? Are there, any of the other surrounding developers? I don't know if Mac or Todd, you have talked to anyone else to be a sub-participant in that kind of approach, but that would, to reduce everyone's expense.
Yeah, that's an opportunity to consider additional partnerships with other developers in the area. Absolutely. That has always been one of the most significant issues is we as a town, we just don't have the money to do that, right? And so we have to find ways to be creative. This given density could be a get on the monies to take care of that. So that's a great idea to find other partners. The other opportunities might lie in the fact that if we did have 2 or 3 million, probably some matching funds through the state or UDOT, there may be some other opportunities out there as well that might help alleviate some of those costs.
So let's just stick on this for a second. Would this be part of a PID? It looks like it'd be part of the PID. So you'd roll in $2.5 million to actually the taxes that would be paid by the buyers of those the homes and townhomes there. Is that correct, Mac or Todd?
Yes, that's correct. So that would be a cost that would be borne solely by this community, and then anyone else that we could get to participate. And Tony made some good comments at Planning Commission in terms of, I'm sure there's money out there. I don't know how much it is, but we've got a meeting set up with UDOT here in the next couple of weeks to explore that. And so we'll find out more once we meet with them.
Yeah, it puts a lot of the burden on any development that you're doing as opposed to some others that are also surrounding there. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The idea is great. It's just a matter of how does that get financed appropriately and fairly?
Yeah, I mean, there's some other sources of funding as well that, I'm sure that it would qualify under the MIDA stuff as far as things they would like to see in support of, improving access to the areas that are intended to be public and shared. So I think we could probably apply some MIDA funds. There's an opportunity for some discussions with some of the developers in the MIDA area to see how we could maybe go after some portion of that as well.
Since that's a significant number, we'd have to, look at that from the PID side of things as if you file for that. Correct?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
as far as
that's
if they were to play 2.5 million, yeah, they'd have to make sure that would make, that wouldn't break the back on the PID, right?
Yep, exactly.
Next section that is noted in the report is a discussion of open space and buffers. The Planning Commission, as they reviewed the proposed concept plan, I think they were pretty happy to see a significant amount of open space proposed in the plan. And the maps and tables provided by the applicant note that there would be a significant amount of undisturbed area. There were some concerns on the Planning Commission. They didn't want to see a site that was completely denuded of native vegetation and the natural slopes. We've had so many challenges with that in the past. They had some concerns about that, but the proposal notes that approximately 45% of the site could remain as undisturbed open space.
Thomas, a question for you. Looking at the drawing where you highlighted that park area, what's the total acreage approximately of that park open space area that's indicated in the concept?
The area kind of with the gazebo in the middle,
Yeah.
that's, again, I'll lean on Todd and McKay, but I'm going to guess that's roughly this, give or take the same size as kind of the hotel area, maybe 15, 20 acres, maybe 15, 17, give or take.
Yeah,
Don't
it's
even
just
know.
a little bit, it's a little bit less than what the hotel is. I don't know the exact acreage we've had. We haven't broken it out that way yet, but it's less than the 20 acres. I'd say it's probably closer to 15.
That's one of the high points on the property that we're just trying to maintain.
Is it flat-ish, or is this?
No,
steep?
it's a mound that, again, we're trying to work as we design our roads. We always are trying to follow the natural topography of the land. I mean, we've got, Todd and I've crawled into the road analysis. We know that we can't go above a 10% grade. And so we've just got to kind of chase the topography in certain areas. That's an area where we're looping our roads around the mountains so as not to, to try to disturb as little of that as we can.
Yeah, I just want to know if a mound is a park, or is it?
No, it's not. It's never been designed it's never been intended to be a flat park where people are going around throwing a football or something like that. What we've done is we put at the top of that, it's more like a lookout point where you get to the top of it and you've got a pavilion with barbecues and fire pits, and it's more of a quiet space where people can go, maybe cook s'mores with their family or hang out and check out the sunrise and sunset. Shaking your head like you don't like that idea.
No open fires.
Huh?
In Hideout. In the summer, we have, anyway. Just,
no open spiders?
Nope, no fires.
Fires.
No open
Fires.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hey, Chris, it was intended to be one of those really bright floodlights with some of the streamers that come up, so it just looks like a fire. Is that all right?
Great. Yeah, no, we're just pretty sensitive here about our interface zone. We're in a pretty significant fire danger zone that we live in.
We can get rid of that.
Okay.
We just leave it a mound.
So yeah. We can do something else.
We can work on that detail. I mean, with the
Right, of course.
appropriate,
But I'm just trying to get an
I
idea.
mean, people have barbecues, and we don't restrict their barbecues, so we just need to.
Yeah. My whole point about asking about that was open space means different things to different people. In this case, if this is called a park, I mean, that conjures up an area to throw a football. But if you're talking about a little more of a lookout, that's a different type of park.
I don't know that do we label it as a park on our?
You did not. You did not.
Yeah.
And
I think we just, go ahead, Todd.
I was just gonna say, I think we envisioned really the park element, quote unquote park element, as being the lagoon, the beach, the amphitheater. That's kind of our programmed area where we were centralizing everything. The other areas were meant to be specifically programmed for, benches, connectivity with the trail, lookouts, kind of sitting areas. not really more active areas, I guess would be kind of the better description, is kind of some inactive and active areas.
Yeah, exactly. We want active we want active space, and we want an inactive space that's just intended to be more quiet. And yeah, anyway.
Okay, thanks.
So along that line, I don't know if, I think Ryan is on. Ryan, I know you were kind of trying to look at slopes, and I think you were trying to coordinate a little bit with Todd and McKay with regard to slopes, road locations, as they said they're trying to follow the natural contours. Did you look at that in terms of slopes and vegetation, open space, undisturbed, et cetera?
We have looked at that, and I guess I just wanted to clarify, because I had a conversation with the applicant yesterday, and I think maybe something was misconveyed in the planning meeting, but for this plan to work, it can be open space when it's done, but it's not undisturbed open space. The vast majority of the site, I believe, is going to need to be mass graded as proposed. And Todd, I'll let you speak if I misspoke, but my understanding.
No, right. Got a little feedback there. No, Ryan, thanks for that. Yeah, no, all I was saying was, yeah, we had that conversation yesterday. I think there was some confusion at Planning Commission, and I look at the table here, and this may be the reason why, but I think there's a difference, and I think we should be really clear about open space versus undisturbed area. You know, two very different things, and somewhat exclusive. The open space calculations, 55-45, meaning 55% disturbed or building area, versus 45% open space. That is accurate, but it doesn't mean that 45% open space will be undisturbed. There will be some grading in that. We don't know yet how much grading there will be. Our goal is to maintain as much undisturbed area as possible, but we can't guarantee that all of it will be. And I can tell you right now, all of the 45% will not be undisturbed. There will be areas that will need to be graded in order to get sewer work, in order to get roadways work, in order to get everything working the way it needs to work. There will be some grading happening there. So we just want to make sure that's clear. And Ryan was pointing that out.
So Thomas had asked us to look at kind of a preliminary analysis of what percentage might be undisturbed. And based on the concept plan, and I haven't done the design, and if you do the whole design, I'm sure you can refine it, but it looks to me like the vast majority of the site will have some sort of mass grading. And so kind of shoreline style, move all the dirt and then put it back and put new landscaping in. That's problematic over in that major drainage, just like it is down lower. In other places, I guess it's just a good understanding that we're all thinking the same way.
Well, with the clarification that I wouldn't say that it's our intention to go to super. I don't know what's going on over at what was the name of the development that you Shoreline. I mean, I've seen it. I don't know that what's happening there is exactly what's going to happen here. I can't say that. I mean, our intent is to put in the roads. We recognize we're going to have to mass grade in order to get the roads in, and there is without a doubt going to have to be some mass grading of sections. But our intent is to try to leave as much undisturbed as we possibly can.
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Todd.
No, you go, Chris. You go.
No, I think the Plan Commission was really onto something when they're talking about undisturbed and their discomfort with the density here. How do we reconcile that? With I believe Ryan, when Ryan says this is, a idea of mass grading and then putting the dirt back, we've seen that here. We know what that looks like. And we know that definitely does run counter to our general plan guidance, where we're trying to keep natural vegetation and preserve the natural beauty, and which includes a lot of like I said, natural vegetation and keeping things as undisturbed as possible. But it's going to be important for the council to, as the Planning Commission asked, to really understand how this amount of density that we're being asked to consider for rezone request would be, congruous with our 2019 general plan.
if that's a concern, it might be appropriate to ask the applicant to provide a conceptual grading plan so we can start to identify those areas that could potentially remain undisturbed.
Yeah, I think that would help. I think Todd and McKay, I think if you're working with, I think Lars is your civil or your LA,
Yeah,
we
both.
could really start to, as you look at the contours, help the council understand what portion is disturbed and developed for buildings, footprints, and what portion is disturbed for, say roads, and it just has to be regraded and resloped to make sure that roads and additional development can be located there, and then that amount that would be preserved undisturbed.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Thomas, and thanks,
Those
Ryan
three
and Chris.
components, yeah. Okay.
Thanks,
Yeah, no,
Ryan.
fair enough.
Thanks,
So
Ryan, for
I
coming
think,
up with a solution to get us forward. Thank you.
if I can just jump in really quick to add some color to that. So we do have Lars working on a preliminary grading plan, but I think it's important to note a couple of things. One, whatever grading plan he comes up with today is going to be a preliminary grading plan until we get through civil engineering, until we get through all of the standards and everything else. And those things will move continuously. And so we could tell you one thing today in terms of what the grading plan, the preliminary grading plan tells you, but that may not be what it is tomorrow. And that could go either way. I think the second point or question I would have is, we're getting really far down the road in terms of engineering and some of these other things that, this was kind of part of our conversation early on was, we're trying to understand what the game plan is, and related to that, what is the goalpost? What is the requirement in terms of undisturbed area that we're trying to hit? Because we just don't want to have some ambiguous number that says, oh, well, it's just not enough, or, it's too dense, or those kinds of things. We just need to understand what it is we're trying to aim for, and then let's work towards that number and figure out what that looks like, if that makes sense.
Well, not only that, I mean, having a preliminary grading plan is not typically a part of a process until we get into plats. It's something that we don't typically do as a part of this process. And like Todd said, I mean, we can put together a grading plan. I don't know that it's going to be 100% accurate. And I would be seriously worried about building some type of mechanism off a preliminary grading plan. It's just not good practice.
So I'll disagree a little bit. I agree with you on flat areas where topography is not really a concern. I haven't seen grading plans, but very typically on the Wasatch back here, where we've got a lot of topography and a challenging site like this one, some level of topography is done at concept, because the topography severely can limit what we can and can't do. And then Chris, I guess to your point, I understand the concept grading plan and the final grading plan are very different, but I guess as it changes, maybe we use the concept to set a minimum open space or a minimum undisturbed area, because you're right, as the concept of the final will be very different.
Is there something in your existing code that outlines what that is?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. What is the standard that we're trying to hit that we're being held to?
Are you asking the standard in terms of undisturbed?
Yeah,
is there
something in your code?
Is there a code? Because we looked through the code, didn't see anything. And Ryan, I think you confirmed this. We didn't see anything that required a minimum undisturbed area. Now, let me just add a caveat to that. Everyone uses the term mass grading. I think mass grading is a very ugly word and is really used, on sites that are being, cut and filled and really demolished. Our goal is to be very strategic with the grading. As McKay mentioned, we'll come in and cut the roads in, put in utility laterals, and on the estate lots, there'll be very little grading on the lots themselves. We'll limit the building pad to where, kind of like a red ledges concept, where you have your building envelope that you can disturb, and then a perimeter around that for grading and backfill and everything else. But then everything else is going to be undisturbed areas. So I just want to make sure we're clear when we're using some of these terms. Mass grading is a very ugly word, and we do not by any means intend to, cut the high parts and fill the low parts and make this a big flat pad. We want to preserve as much as that topography and natural vegetation as possible as well. It's just hard to tell today until you really get all the way through the engineering what it looks like and what that is. And without any standard or code section that says, hey, here's what you have to adhere to, it's hard for us to know kind of where that comes. And so it's a little bit cart before the horse, as McKay was saying.
So Mayor and Council, this is Tim, and I need to be on the record for this, and I agree 100% with Ryan. Being a city engineer in other places, you can provide that preliminary grading plan, and the preliminary grading plan, even though it does change a little bit, it doesn't drastically change. And so I just need to make sure that I understand what you're saying, but the reality of it is, if you don't have this planned out now, then town council and my staff and Ryan's group should feel very uncomfortable moving forward until you have something really, really close to being finalized. So I just think that I want this project. I know everyone's excited for it, but my issue, we want to make sure the roads are done, the grading's done well, we have places for storm drain, et cetera. And all that is delved out of a preliminary grading plan that, yes, could change, but it won't drastically change like you're saying. So Mayor, thank you for letting me interject on that. And I do apologize for interrupting.
I was just also going to add too that, we're not talking about an allowed use right now. We're talking about increase in density, a rezone. And so even if it's not exactly in the code of it can't be graded by a certain amount, clearly there's concern with the number of the density on the acreage and how it will present, and will anything be left to its natural. So I just want to put that out there for, I think it's appropriate if the council wants to require it. That's within, this discussion area based on the density on this site that's being asked to be upzoned.
Thank you, Polly. So guys, I think we're hearing a pretty strong message here. I'll ask that you work with Thomas and engineering to decide, what is the appropriate level of preliminary grading per design, because it can be, from preliminary to very detailed kind of thing. But I'll ask that you please take that on as a path forward from tonight's discussion. See if we can get everybody more comfortable with what's going to happen up there.
Hey, since we're talking preliminaries here, I've looked through this and I don't see enough on the traffic flow, the preliminary traffic study. 600 units with multiple people are going to add to the traffic issues. So have you done any studies on that? I don't see any numbers reflecting that.
Yep.
Yes,
Hales Engineering completed a full traffic analysis for the 610 units.
That hasn't been shared with us.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you share that with us, or because I don't see?
Yeah, of course.
Document.
Yep, of course. Yep. They recommend accel decel lanes, nothing out of the ordinary. So yeah, happy to share that.
I think I already sent that over to Thomas.
Yeah, and I think, Ryan, you've started to review that correctly. Correct?
I did. I got it yesterday, I believe. Okay. I haven't gone through it. I've been at a conference, so I do have it though.
And does that include linking up with 2A, and changing I think where the road meets 248, and so that if we do get a traffic light, it would be in one place. Is that all correct?
It does not.
It does not, Ralph. No.
It shows it's based on the supposition that we on the 2 access points that we're showing.
Yeah, and so maybe Polly or the mayor, you can help us understand that. I know that the town signed an agreement with UDOT about limiting access to 248. I mean, we have an agreement with UDOT, and
we already have our 2 access points. We already have our 2 access points on UDOT. I don't see UDOT taking those access points away.
I don't,
They're in the agreement, Chris, that these were access points. It's not, the initial plan was, it's not a lighted intersection. The problem with what you're asking, Ralph, is you're going through land that isn't theirs to get to be able to say, run a frontage road and tie into a future lighted intersection, because they don't own the land all the way to that location. UDOT is currently considering changing their specs for anybody entering into this 248 corridor. They're recognizing that it's that the ship has sailed, regardless of this particular development. The ship has sailed, and that the stretch of 248 between inside of Wasatch County going up to Toohey is no longer limited access because there's so much development here. And so they're looking at what they want to do to pretend, so I think it has the potential to, again, UDOT moves at a very measured pace, but in my discussions with them, it appears that they're working on potentially slowing down the corridor, adding additional lighted requirements for intersections and so forth. So we'll see, but to do what you're asking, Ralph, unless you go up through Golden Eagle and come around, I don't know how you could tie into the current projected lighted intersection up there at Toohey, across from Toohey and Golden Eagle Road.
We're happy to talk with him though, Ralph. We're happy to work with him.
I thought you were in that process. Maybe that's why I brought it up. It's just too bad that this is going to require egress and entrance without, where you could have a much safer scenario if this was coordinated. I understand it's not your land, but there's also considerations for the people who are going to be living there for a long time afterwards, so to speak, and for the rest of the town that are, is going to have to deal with this. So, I'd like to look at this a little bit more closely when we get a chance.
The mayor is absolutely right on those points. But one of the things that we talked about at Planning Commission, and Todd and I have said, is that we're more than happy to sit down and meet with him, Ralph, and talk to him and see if there's a way that we can work out some type of an arrangement there. To the mayor's point, it's not land that we own. And so it's something that's outside of our control. We have to plan for what we can control today, and then just work in good faith with this guy to see if it's a possible option to connect to him over to the east.
Yeah, understand the difficulties there, but yeah. So have you done any reach outs so far?
We just are now getting his name, just figuring out who. We thought for the longest time that it was Bob Martino. And so we didn't even want to broach the subject, but we found out just within the last couple of days that it's not Bob. And so, and I apologize. I don't mean to disparage Bob. It's just that we tried to put a deal together with him before and had a hard time doing it. And so we think that it might be easier working with a different party.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously one proposal would be to get a right of way, and buy that, basically, and see if that factors into, a better approach to the traffic issues here, or future traffic issues if this becomes as dense as it is. So anyway, I'd like to hear more about that.
And just to chime in there for a minute, Ralph, we had a good conversation with Ryan yesterday on this. And one of the suggestions was figuring out a way to at least provide a stub out that if that access became available in the future, we could connect into it and route traffic back. And I think that's a very real possibility that we can look into and see if there's a way to do that, and at least provide for the future if that were to come to pass.
Yeah, I just wanted to pile on there. Yeah, at a minimum, I think we need to stub a road out so that when that parcel develops, it'll go through like we intend. And then I think the town can work and help facilitate those discussions to see if we can get that to go in sooner. But this development needs to get over to that planned lighted intersection. I think that would make a lot of sense for the town and its development and the whole area in general.
I mean, 2A is only going to grow, so all that, there's just going to be a lot more traffic there. My God, cutting across, the road is just asking for, accidents.
Yep. No, that's great. I think you're right on, Ryan. We've got to keep looking forward and in the future. So, and same thing, Ralph. Totally right on. As it's showing now, that's suboptimal.
Yeah, I know you guys are thinking about it. I'm not laying this on you, but at the same time, 5 years from now, there's going to be a lot of people there coming out of those exits, and we have to think about the traffic flow and the safety. So I think it'll
we
be a
understand.
better development. I think it's easier I think with that kind of situation, it would be easier to sell if I was looking at that as a buyer.
No, we appreciate that. We appreciate that.
And just so I'm clear, Ryan, the recommendation would be that on the furthest east side, there's a stub road, either a continuation of one of the two kind of primary roads, or at the end of one of the potential cul-de-sac roads, there's a stub road that could be, or right-of-way reserved to get over to the property on the further east side. Is that right?
Yeah, at a minimum, I would say that we build the road all the way to the property line. Preferably, we work with that property owner and just build the road all the way over now.
Can I ask where he's at in the process?
He's behind you guys.
Is he doing
Yeah, I mean,
anything?
He's come forward with a couple of things in the past, but keeps waffling, so nothing's really happened.
If somebody at the city has his contact information and he can send it, and he or she can send it to Todd and I, we will reach out to him.
Yeah, we can do that.
And maybe Mayor, you can get behind that a little bit, because maybe that would incent that person. It might drive the price up too. So
Well, see, that's the thing, Ralph. We just don't want to have any preconditions that, I mean, these things are kind of delicate, right? Like, we don't want to have any preconditions that force us to go over to our neighbor and have them say, well, we understand the city's requiring that you come through our property for something. And when we, anyway, I think you get it.
Yeah. And we don't want to force you into that, spend that money in other better ways for the project. But it's also a safety issue, so.
Agreed.
So Thomas, you want to bring us back to the?
Yes.
And then we'll.
So if as we think about open space and kind of undisturbed and disturbed areas, I think the recommendation to really look at what those percentages are with the pretty thorough preliminary grading plan would be helpful. I think along that line, we'll need to understand where the stormwater retention and or detention basins would be located. I know that on the initial version, you had a couple of them in the UDOT right of way. That may or may not be possible, likely down the road. If they expand that road, or trails or a spine path gets put in there, as we talked about Todd or McKay earlier, they would make you move them. So those may not be as likely. You'll want to get those on site, or if they're off property, you'd have to have an easement to be able to develop them off property. Just something that needs to be confirmed.
I think we're working on solutions for that.
Got it.
Again, that preliminary grading plan will help with that as well.
I think so too. Yeah. The next couple of things kind of get into design. The Planning Commission had some concerns. They wanted to make sure that the design would, tie into the town of Hideout's vernacular, et cetera. Typically, there has been a requirement for a design review committee. Typically, it's a planning commission member, a town council member, and the town planner. They recommended that a similar set of standards, guidelines be implemented for the Boulders project, and a DRC, a design review committee set up. And I don't think, Todd or McKay, do you have any input on that? I don't think you guys were
No, we're fine having, I mean, we'll have pretty strict architectural design guidelines and standards. We'll have our own ARC, our own architectural review committee. If the city also has a board, or are you saying, Thomas, that that 2 or 3 of those people sit on our ARC, or that we have separate?
It's an interesting, I think we were thinking separate, but it may be an opportunity to, we'll talk about this, but it may be an opportunity to combine the two entities. There's no sense in going through it twice if we don't have to, if we can come to an agreement to get it as a single entity. And again, your precedent images, some of the photos, et cetera, right in line with where Hideout is. It's just really a confirmation of formality. And so I probably recommend combining it, keep it a little bit more efficient.
Yeah, I think we'd be open to doing something like that. And yeah, I think so. Todd, how do you feel about that? Combining the.
Yeah, no, I've actually had some success on other projects that we've done in terms of combining both, a town and a developer board. We generally hire a very well-heeled architect to run that for us. And let them be the experts there and come up with those. So yeah, no, I think it could be great if there was a volunteer who wanted to do that. It's a lot of work for whoever does do that. There's a lot of review and meetings and back and forth, especially with a project of this nature and this size. So I think we just got to make sure whoever that is, they have the capability and time to commit to that, because it is at times maybe a full-time job, not always, but at times. So. No, I think it's a great idea.
And I just add on to that, typically our ARC board is, for at least our side of it, isn't always paid. The architects are, right? But I've reviewed in detail the ARC with Hideouts, and I know that it's not one that you've adopted. It's one that goes through sort of a different channel. Ours is not going to look like that. Our fee structure is not going to be like that. It can't be like that. It would end up, they're just astronomical. And so, but we can talk about how to set that up and how we would do it, Thomas. But I think it would be a good idea to have a planning commissioner, city council member. We'd have, probably Todd and I, we'd have a couple architects on our board and other developers.
So one thing I would say, I mean, typically the things that the town is interested in tend to be materials of construction, building heights. There's a lot of stuff ARC is going to do as far as a lot of internal stuff, a lot of stuff with some color. There'll be some places where, I think, again, we can find the right way to work together, but there's going to be parts of the stuff that you're doing at your ARC level that the town really isn't going to care about. I guess is what I'm saying. But
yeah,
there'll be things you're saying, do we want the ceiling heights to do this? Do we want to have vaulted or whatever on the inside? We're like, we don't care.
That's exactly right. We don't care about the inside. The inside's the inside, right? It's the outside. And I would also add to that, it's the landscape architecture as well. The plant choices and et cetera. We have lots of experience here, some of us, about what not to plant in this local area, and what's good and what's not so good. And also in keeping with our 2019 general plan, protecting views, et cetera. There are certain plants you definitely don't want to plant.
Yeah, and Chris, as a part of that, we'll have a complete planting plan and everything with approved and not approved materials. We'll keep it as close to native materials as possible. Wildflowers, things that are completely consistent with the landscape vernacular of the area, and all of that we can, Thomas, that's probably right up your bailiwick, and so we can review a lot of that with you. So
no, that makes sense. Infrastructure was the next item on the list. I don't know, Todd or McKay, if you guys want to walk through that. You are, as far as we understand, proposing a public infrastructure district, I think that should say. And you might want to just kind of explain to the council how that works, because that would be something that ultimately you would have to come back to council for, at a subsequent date, for an approval of a PID, correct?
That's correct. So the project itself and some of the public infrastructure will be financed through a public infrastructure district. I assume everyone knows, but for those of you who don't know, that district is no liability on the town. The liability is solely on the project and is used for project improvements only. So again, we've talked about some of what that could be, but that will come forward via a letter of intent. That letter of intent will then be kind of the kickoff for that. And then there will be an adoption of an ordinance by the town that will allow for those to be created. And then everything else will be done by us, through that process. And the town, again, like I said, it's no liability to the town. It's a financing mechanism for infrastructure. And, it's really going to be a process with Gilmore Bell, who I believe the town's engaged as bond counsel. And then that process with the underwriters and everyone else involved. So pretty simple process, pretty straightforward.
We have some experience around that, given that there's already a special infrastructure development district inside the town of Hideout. Not a PID, but it's an earlier version of what the PID has.
Yeah, similar concept. Yep, similar concept. So nothing new, but that's critical to this project and will allow for us to finance a lot of these major improvements and really make this a community that'll stand out from everything else that's up there, which is really exciting.
I can go to the next section. This was an assessment of the recommended conditions by the Planning Commission, ensuring that there was an understanding of a maximum density allowance for both units and ERUs, an undisturbed requirement. We'll work with Todd and McKay on that. Minimum square footage for commercial development. Again, this is more of the kind of the pub, restaurant, intimate commercial kind of space. Roads meeting the town code standards would be a requirement. Trails and open space to be approved by the Parks Open Space and Trails Committee. The design standards and process formalized, as we just discussed. Traffic analysis at level B. It looks like Ryan is working on that. Any updated zoning standards would apply to the project. And then connection for emergency secondary access into Golden Eagle and visitor parking, snow storage areas clearly identified and included in the concept plan. So that's kind of where the Planning Commission ended up with regard to the overall site plan, concept plan review. I don't know if you guys have any questions with regard to that, but that is that was an attempt. Those few pages were an attempt to give you guys a bit of a background where the applicant started, where they ended up, what the Planning Commission reviewed, where the concerns were, and again, they did vote to approve that concept plan with those conditions.
Are we going to talk anything around the projected numbers that would come into the town, particularly with the commercial at this point? Or is the rest of the council comfortable with that? Because I've seen some preliminary on that, and I have some questions. And for me, at least, half the reason I would be doing this is, the benefit financially to the town in the long term. So I'm not sure if everyone else is comfortable. I had one question that I wanted to drill into a little bit more, but since I don't see any numbers here, I was wondering, are we covering that tonight, Thomas? Or is at this point, or what?
We don't have that included at this point. It's not to say that we shouldn't or we can't cover it. We can. I wonder if maybe that's something we'd like to give you all after we kind of get through the concept plan stuff, which is where we are now, and then walk you through some of the rezone request and get through kind of the land use information, and then maybe jump into that if you're okay with that.
I'm okay. That sounds fine. But
Okay.
we definitely need to cover that in the context of
Agreed.
what are we giving up versus what are we getting as well.
Yep.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Need to talk about
They
that.
provided an economic, a fiscal analysis, and so you should see that. Yeah.
Yeah, I did see the second version of that, which was a little bit more in depth. And I remember asking Todd some questions, but I want to drill into a couple on the taxes. So that would help me understand this a little bit better and the value of it.
Okay. So what I'll try to do then is go through the rezone request. So this is a pretty complicated project in as much as it does a number of really, really good things. The housing typologies, the variation in housing, as I said up front in the meeting, are really, really good. You've got multi-unit condos, you've got casitas, you've got villas, you've got single family units. It's a really good mix of housing. So the housing ladder is really good. What that does, though, is make it really hard to try to find a zoning designation that is perfect for a particular area, right? And so as we were working through this with Todd and McKay, it was really hard to find the right zoning designations. And so the proposed zoning designations you see here look a little high. They look a little dense. In fact, I think if you scroll down just a little, Mayor, do I have it on this page? Yeah, why don't you go down just past that one? You could start to see the proposed zoning districts right there. You'll see R3, again, that allows 3 units per acre. They've got an area designated for that. There's the R6, the R20, and then neighborhood mixed use would be the area around the hotel. Remember, R6 is 6 units per acre, R20 is 20 units per acre. That R20 is certainly appropriate for the big house condos, but in order to kind of cluster some of the triplexes and or the other slightly more dense development and protect the open space, the area of the R6 and the R20 look a little bit bigger. And so if you just took this at face value, you'd be looking at a zoning designation that would allow for 1,923 units, which is significant, right? It's not something that we want to see. And so that's to say that any rezone here would be captured in a master development agreement that would maximize the units to the 610 keys, doors, units, and the 577 ERUs, if that's exactly where it lands. So just keep that in mind. With all of that said, Polly and I and McKay and I earlier today, and then Polly and I subsequently, were talking about the fact that even this zoning doesn't necessarily do exactly what we wanted to do. I think the hotel and the neighborhood mixed use, the NMU, is a conditional use. And so it made us think, you've done this in the past, maybe it's not a formal rezone as we've outlined here, but maybe it's something like a planned performance development. You have that allowance in your code. You did it up at the claim site. It's an overlay, a zoning designation in conjunction with the master development agreement that allows for flexibility. That may be an easier way to go. It may allow for everybody to get what they want without people being terribly concerned about the 1923 units that could appear here, say, if this project didn't move forward. With that being said, if we did move forward with a rezone, it would be active, say, in 1 year from now, subsequent to a formal MDA signed, preliminary plat, et cetera. We could protect that way. It's just that per a conversation earlier today, it may be better to look at the planned performance development kind of as an overlay. It protects everybody and gives you all the flexibility that you want. So Polly could probably add to this discussion, make this a little bit easier. The only thing we would need to do, the planned performance development does not allow for the commercial development, the hotel. So in that area, we probably would have to make a recommendation, again, conditioned upon MDA being signed, preliminary plat, et cetera, being completed within the year, then the zoning would take effect. So you may have some neighborhood mixed use where you see that yellow on that map, and then maybe everything around it's PPD, planned performance development. That does allow flexibility. This is a concept plan. Things will change. That may be a way to go.
Yeah, I'll just chime in. I think that we should be looking that way because it would be more, what's the right word? Just more that it would it would cater to what they're asking to do more specifically, instead of creating zones that aren't really applicable.
Yeah, and because of the ambiguity of a concept plan, the zoning districts with the higher density had to be larger areas, right? To ensure that the flexibility was there, but the PPD does that as well. So it protects both sides, I think, a little bit more definitively.
And does the PPD, does that become, when does that become effective? After the final concept plan is approved, or the final?
No,
plan is
the concept plan went through the planning commission, so that is approved. It would have to be, I would leave this to Polly, but I think it would be upon signature and confirmation and approval by the council for the master development agreement.
Yeah, so let me talk about that a little bit if I can, because I kind of had a revelation today about how to deal with this. You know, right now, all we have is a very general concept plan, as the developers, as Todd and Mac just said. You know, we don't have a grading plan. We don't have the specifics, because it's the cart before the horse. But if we're going to go forward, what I would recommend is that any rezone be contingent on entering into a development agreement within the next 6 months. And with that development agreement should be a preliminary plat, so that we can, it's impossible. Part of why staff was struggling, or at least myself, and why you've been getting both at the planning commission and here, why the MDA was so late, was because it's really hard to write something if you don't have anything concrete to base it on. And to increase density based on a general concept plan puts us in the same situation that we've had with some of our other developments, where we've really struggled because it hasn't been well planned, and it's not clear what's being provided and what's not. So my recommendation would be that, we have the draft MDA that was distributed just minutes before this meeting, but just to kind of start that discussion and start putting it on paper, but that the requirement be that any rezone would not go into effect unless the development agreement is signed within 6 months. And in order to have a development agreement signed, it would also have to have a preliminary plat that's approved. Does that make sense?
Polly, I'm not quite sure how Todd and I are able to get there. Sorry, this is the first that we've heard of this. I think I understand what you guys are driving at, and I don't disagree with maybe the mechanism that you're going after is to have a lot of these details outlined in a development agreement. If I were to correct me if I'm wrong, Thomas and Polly, your concern is that a rezone, we have a concept plan that is approved that lays out how Todd and I really intend to develop the project. We may have some variation in that, as all developments do, as you put in the roads like we've talked about, and grading affects it, and road slopes and stuff like that. But we plan on following our concept plan, and with slight variations. What I think that maybe your concern is that if you were to rezone something, the code within the rezone allows too broad discretion for any one pod. Is that maybe the concern, and therefore, or maybe not specific enough detail, and we want to just outline where the overlay, like what we talked about, Thomas, where the overlay goes over the top of this zoning and sort of corrects maybe any errors or things that the city wants or that we need in order to make sure that it comports with the concept plan. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, look, we've got a concept. We want to make sure that the rezone that we're marrying up with this thing works in such a way that it doesn't allow this broad discretion to go change things dramatically. And
it's less about, sorry, McKay, it's less about you and more about well, indirectly, less about what you guys are trying to do, but more about if we rezone this land that makes it eligible for 1,900 units, and then you guys decide
Totally.
we're not going to go through and sell it off.
That's
Totally.
And the
And
buyer
we-
comes in and says, "Well, I'm excited. I'm going to put 1,900 units up there." We're going
We-
to, so
we
we're
are-
trying to figure
We
out.
get
how-
it. No, we get it.
We are,
Okay, so
we are
that's
perfectly
what we're trying to
fine.
fix.
Yeah, we are
Yeah.
perfectly fine having criteria in there that states while the zoning may allow up to X amount of units, and we don't state that, of course. Todd and I are perfectly fine saying you are capped at 610 units, period, or 575 acres,
Absolutely.
whatever that is. Yeah, we are
Absolutely.
100% okay saying, regardless of what the zoning designation says, you know, you may be up to 20 units per acre in this area, but you know, or whatever the thing is, it is not allowed to, you're not going above 610. I think Polly and Tom's and everybody, frankly, I think we can, what does not work for Todd and I is to say that we have 6 months to enter into an MDA. I think that we can do what we need to do in the MDA and outline all of those specific details. So number one, what the zoning that we put on here matches the concept. And when I say matches it, what I'm talking about is height limitations, setback requirements, frontage, front setbacks, side yard setbacks, parking requirements, all that stuff that's already built into the code. You guys already have that in there. I think our overlay will kind of tweak it in areas to make sure that it matches up with our concept plan and with the use. And then all we do is as a part of this MDA, this overlay, we match that stuff up and tweak it where it needs to be for your guys' benefit and for ours. And then say we are capped at no matter what at 610 units. I don't think it takes us 6 months to get there to do that at all. And Todd and I can't do that. We've got to be able to have the assurances. We have to have a master development agreement in hand at the time that we close. And so, but I think at the end of the day, I think that we can absolutely get to what that is. So you guys feel comfortable and we feel comfortable and we're not having up to, 2,000 units built on the mountain.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that we kind of sprung this on you in the meeting. It was kind of something that evolved as I was looking at the documents today. As you know, we're going in warp speed. We've gotten, we're asking to do an enormous development. Staff is asked to try to handle this in a timeline that is, kind of like Star Trek, right? Like I can just see the stars going by my eye. So, we're doing
Love
the
the
best.
reference.
But that being said, maybe we need to talk offline a little bit, but I think we're trying to get to the same place, which is some predictability. What this would do would mean that you would have a zoning ordinance in hand. But frankly, I don't know that we can have a development agreement executed by the time of your closing because we don't have, it's the cart and the horse, but you're asking us to take the cart without the horse. And we can't, I would not recommend to the town that it's in the town's best interest, despite the wonderful project that you're proposing. We just don't know enough right now to pin anything down. And so that's my concern.
Talk to me about, sorry, Todd, did you have something that you want to say?
I just really quick, and we totally appreciate that, Polly. And we, again, we cannot say enough about the town and staff and Thomas and Ryan and council and planning commission and everybody who's worked together. And we appreciate it and we love it. And this has been a really fun process to try and create a really exciting community together. And we want to continue that. So with that being said, we appreciate your concern and all those things. And I guess maybe it's just my simple mind, but I kind of compartmentalize it and look at it and say, I agree with you. The one needs to go with the other. But at the same time, I think from a development agreement, and I kind of use this terminology with Ryan on the phone the other day, we look at the development agreement as the rule book. And generally speaking, code is the rule book, and the zoning says, okay, here's your maximum, and you mirror that up with your code, and you say, okay, well, here's what you get. And maybe the maximum is 610, but you only end up with 600 because of detention or grading or, you know, whatever it may be. But you know that, hey, that's your maximum. And if you can get there by meeting the code requirements, then great. And all we're saying is with the development agreement is saying, hey, there's some nuances related to the zoning that could potentially exceed that 610 or could potentially exceed some of these things. And we just want to make sure and bookend those. And from the town's perspective, as well as our perspective, we just want to know what the rule book is. And that's it. We just want to know what the rules are that we have to play by. And then it'll fall where it falls. And if we can't get to 610, then we can't get to 610, and that's okay. We just need to make sure we understand what the rules are before we make a huge financial commitment to this project, so that we can understand what it's going to look like at the end of the day.
And Todd, let me just jump in by saying that I think, Polly, if me, you, Thomas, and maybe even Ryan sat down, and of course Todd on our end, but we just sat down and we went over the sections of the code. Like, you guys have tables, you have a couple tables in whether it's the R6, the R3, the R20, or the neighborhood mixed use zoning. And all of those tables are exactly, those sections are the playbook. That's the playbook for each one of those zones. And I think we could, on our end, we could prepare that information for you on where it is that we think that we have some maybe slight variations, and where we absolutely don't. The rest of the code just completely applies. That is not I've done this a million times. It's not a difficult calculus. We can do that and have that stuff prepared for you by Tuesday of next week. So when we sit down, we could say, look, Polly, this is the stuff that we're just talking about. Your existing code works here, here, and here. These are the only slight variations to it. And that is the rule book. You already have the rule book in place. We're just talking about how we marry up the rule book to the concept plan. I really don't think it's as difficult as we may think it is. And all of that can just be rolled into a dev agreement.
Yeah, so, and I mean, I don't know about your other projects, but I'd say that your premise is slightly different, because what you're proposing isn't an allowed use. So if you were just proposing a subdivision, right, that was already within the zone, whatever, it would just be, you have the rule book, we have our code,
well, like which, give me an example of what's not an allowed use.
You guys are asking for 5 times the density of what currently the land is intended for.
But what I'm saying is
because of that, what the purpose to me of a development agreement is to work out those gives and gets and what the project is going to look like. And so I totally get the cost of something like this. It's very hard to be all in without knowing that you're
we can't be all in without knowing. I'm just going to tell you right now, we can't. Like, there's no way we can close on a piece of property without knowing what it is that we have. Our banks won't do it. And so now, if it means that Todd and I have to burn the midnight oil to make sure that we go through everything and get all the information to you that you need to have, then we will absolutely do that. But I look at it pretty simply, and I say we have R3, R6, R20, and neighborhood mixed use zones. All of those have codes written to it. We're not rewriting a playbook per se. We are using what it is that we have and tweaking it. That's all I'm saying there, Polly, is that we're not creating something from scratch. We're just using the existing code.
So, and I mean, ultimately, this is going to be a decision for the council. I mean, staff, based on some discussions today, as Thomas just mentioned, is instead of changing all it to these 4 zones, staff is recommending that we stay with mountain with the performed plant PPD, right? The
PPD, Plan performance development. Yep.
plan performance development as an overlay of the mountain zone with also a rezone with neighborhood mixed use, so that you can get what you guys want to achieve, but we're not talking about, so that we're looking instead under that concept, which talks more about clustering, that type of thing. So I know that's a shift, but again, we're just trying to work through it. So, staff's happy to work with you. I think we can also kind of go through some of the issues that we bring up in the DA and start talking about it, because, you have to convince the council that this increase in density is worth, that those impacts to the town are worth it, to the
And maybe
town.
it's, and maybe it isn't, honestly, maybe it isn't. I don't know.
I
I mean, this isn't, we've spent the last, 3 months working within a certain code. And now all of a sudden we're completely changing the zone designation. I don't even know what a PPD is. What is it? A PP, what is it called?
It's a plan performance development. And it's an option that ties the concept plan and the density agreed to by the council just into an MDA. It gives you actually more flexibility than you get by the current zoning designations. And so it doesn't take away any density. It sets a guaranteed density for you. I mean, subject to you being able to build on those conditions, build on the slope conditions, et cetera, right? Same as the zoning designation does. It's no different. I do think, again, and we should talk about this. I mean, we don't have to make a decision right now, but I think that there might need to be a neighborhood commercial, that neighborhood mixed use, or that designation may need to be in there to accommodate the hotel, because plant performance development is really for residential. And so we might have to do that. So it might be a little bit of a hybridized version, but it's not to take anything away. It's just it offers flexibility, but it does offer a cap as well.
I guess
if I can just
go ahead.
Can I just jump in really quick? I think, I think if I understand correctly, I think that the direction you're going potentially could be better. I think the hard part is we've spent a significant amount of time and a significant amount of money to get to the point to where we're at today. And, we thought we were down to kind of the last few items that we wanted to tighten up. So I guess, this feels like a significant change that we weren't prepared to even discuss tonight. And I'm not really sure if we understand 100% what that looks like. And it sounds like maybe you're saying we need to keep some of the NMU in there. I guess my suggestion is we probably need to explore this separately. And I'm not sure this is the place to explore it, because, we need to understand what that means and how that looks and how it proceeds. But at the end of the day, in our minds, and again, I got a simple mind, but in our minds, we look at it, we say the zoning gives you one thing and the development agreement gives you, kind of the bookend of that. The zoning gives you kind of your designation and what are the kind of the code sections that apply to that designation. And then your development agreement gives you some more specific items that fit within that code section. We've got a draft of that. We recognize that there's going to be some back and forth in getting that cleaned up and revised over the next week. But I guess we don't understand what the PPD does in terms of changing that. And it sounds like, again, I don't really know. I'm not sure it's even fruitful to discuss it here now.
I think we should discuss it subsequently, but I just do want to reiterate, it doesn't change the concept plan in any way whatsoever. It doesn't change the density allowances. In fact, it offers far more flexibility than the current zoning designations. But let's talk about it. The only reason we were bringing it up is because it may offer, given how early on you are in the concept planning process, it may offer you opportunities to tweak a little bit where roads may have to change. I know at the last planning commission meeting, it was noted that one of the roads is actually in a drainage ditch that kind of goes up toward the single family lots. That'll certainly have to be moved, right? That'll impact what you can do if you have a zoning designation. With the PPD, it's an allowance for flexibility. So it's not to take anything away. It's actually to allow for that flexibility, given how early on we are in the process. We don't have a preliminary plat yet. We don't have any of the streams ephemeral or otherwise identified. So you're as much as you're kind of winging it early on at this conceptual stage, so are we. This just offers flexibility. We don't have to go that way. We could look at the zoning map, and if town council is comfortable with that amount of density potentially being on the site, if you were to walk away, et cetera, we can certainly look at that and go that way. It was just an opportunity to provide a secondary avenue, or a hybridized version, I really should say.
No, and I think I understand that. Let me just make two comments really quickly. One, and I know you didn't mean it that way, but when you say winging it, obviously this is the process, right? This is the process been established by the state. You go through a concept plan, you go through a rezone, you go through a development agreement, and then you define the project tighter and tighter and more narrow as you get down the process. And the reason why it's done that way is so that a developer doesn't have to spend millions of dollars up front and have a town say, yeah, that's great, but we don't like you very much. And so I want to keep that in perspective as we talk about these things, where, our goal with this process was to get to a point to where the town says, hey, look, we love your concept. We love you. We love your wife and your kids and everybody else. And we're great. And that was a joke. But with that being said, we recognize that, there's some finality that needs to come to this. And then that was one of the conversations we had with Ryan yesterday, which is, hey, there's some things that need to be worked out. And that starts with grading and drainage.
When we say winging, I don't mean process wise. We mean we've got a concept plan, but we don't yet have preliminary grading. We don't yet understand everything. I'm sure you are as well. Things will shift. Things will tweak at least.
For sure.
Right? That's what we mean, not process wise. I mean, in terms of what we're looking at. And again, I just want to make sure that it would still guarantee the density, the layout, the concept, but we're open to explore either one. It was just an idea to provide maybe an easier way for maybe council and or the community to tolerate what looks like.
So let me jump in, Thomas.
Huh?
All right, thank you. Let me jump in for a second, guys. All right. So I think there's two pieces of homework. One is that Todd and McKay said, hey, they do some work to show you, to put the quote rule book together. And that's fine, and we should do that. And I think we should put our rule book together, which is what a PPD does, what its limits are. Somebody needs to describe it to those guys and give them a chance to, and do that quickly, to give them a chance to cogitate on that and see that it's, that it is in fact potentially an easier and more flexible way to do it while managing the bookends. So I think that's your challenge, Polly and Thomas, is to find a way to give them the language associated with the PVD and what it can and what it can't do, so that those guys can have a chance to say, okay, if we went this way, I could live with that or not.
We'll do that.
I think part of the disconnect is that all the development agreements that I've reviewed over the last 17 years as a town attorney have been at least preliminary plat stage. I have not come across any that are this early in the process. Have you guys done one before? I'm just curious, so I can, I'm just trying to brainstorm so we can find other examples, find other success stories.
We have two projects right now that are going through the process, and in fact, the city code requires that the development agreement is submitted at the time of rezoning, and they're all approved together. So it's for us, it's pretty common practice, because again, like I said, the two go hand in hand. The preliminary plat is designed off of what the zoning code allows, and then the specific requirements of the master development agreement. And so those two things are needed in order to move to the next step, so that you know what you're designing to. And like I said, I keep using it, the rule book. Like, it's just the rule book. It says, okay, well you can get 610 as long as you can meet all the rules. And if we can meet the rules, great. And if not, then it's less than 610. It's, whatever it ends up being. And
It actually, a
like-
better way of maybe describing it is it's an addendum to the rule book is really what it is. You already, the rule book, that's maybe where I'm a little frustrated because, I've spent countless hours going through the code, and I feel like I know the code on these different zones, and that is the rule book. And then the MDA is an addendum to it. It's like an overlay, right? You're just overlaying this over the top of these zones and saying, here's how we are modifying the existing zones that we're zoning it to. And so I'm just thinking at this and I'm like, holy cow, I don't know what the PPD is. And maybe it is, Thomas, maybe it's a lot more flexible and easier to do it. I just don't know what it is. I've got 3 or 4 months invested in, more than that, invested in this other one. And I'm just saying, why not just look at that and layer and do an overlay over the top of it? And this overlay says, I'm sorry, like the code says you can do X amount of density, but you only get
Okay.
610.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't mean to take us down a rabbit hole. I think just to bring it back, we both sides have a lot of homework to do and continued work to do. Why don't we continue to talk about the terms of the agreement so that, because what we're talking about are some different processes, some different timing mechanisms so that we can work through things. But why don't we talk, let's have the council talk about what they see and talk about input we got from the Planning Commission. Thomas did a very nice job, making sure that this meets the general plan, all that. And then, I did hear today that you guys do have a little bit more time, that, there's no way this can happen in a week.
We agree, Polly.
So maybe we should also be, we'll deal with that at the end, but pushing this out a little further so that we can make sure that we can do our homework and meet offline. I mean, I haven't even met your guys' attorney, right? Like, we haven't worked through any of that. So I don't even know who it is. So
We agree with that, Polly.
All right, so Carol, Carol, as a member of council, has a question. Go ahead, Carol.
It's not a question, it's just a statement. And that is, we got all this information late yesterday. And I did go through it today, but I'm just feeling frustrated and pressured that you're asking us to make enormous decisions in terms of a five time increase in density and so many other things you're asking us to approve. And I just feel like we need more information, as Polly stated, and that we need more time. I mean, I certainly am not ready tonight to make any kind of decision, and you're asking us for a decision next week. And I just don't feel like we're going to have enough time to really look at all the issues. That's my comment. I'm one planning commissioner or one town council member. And, maybe the other town council people want to speak up to that too.
We agree with you, Carol.
I'd probably add to what Carol was just saying, because I think somehow I was asking Polly about this, and then we went off into the PPD, which sounds like a creative, good way to go. But you guys, Todd and Mac, aren't familiar with that vehicle. So, getting acquainted with that might be useful. Don't know. My concern is going back to being locked into a density of, 1923 or whatever that number is, which is actually 3.5 times, or at least 3 times the density that we planned for this. So we don't want to be stuck legally in a situation. So,
We don't want that either, Rob.
Yeah. Yeah, so here's Mac. If you guys can go back and do the math, so to speak, that takes that number down, that protects the town legally, so to speak, within the context of what you think are the zonings, what the current rule book is, I would say that's fine. I mean, that makes it, easier for you because you're not used to dealing with PPDs. So if you can come back and say, hey, we're, the maximum density anybody will ever have here is, closer to the 600 mark, so to speak. That would make me feel a lot better that we're protecting the town in the right ways.
And we're totally prepared to do that, just so you know.
No, I think it's a great suggestion, and we're all on the same page there.
I agree with both Carol and Ralph on that. We did just get all this information yesterday, and it's a lot to go over. I think it's a fabulous project. I really like it a lot, but I would like to see the commercial numbers that Ralph was talking about as well, because I never received anything about that. And I think we need to get a little more information, but I really do like the project.
That's great. And Mr. Mayor, obviously your call in terms of how you want to handle it, but I think with where we've gone so far, it sounds like everyone's looking for some more time to review the package and get some more information. We're happy to provide additional information, but maybe it makes sense to adjourn the meeting and give everyone a chance to review it, and then circle back. Thomas, Paulie, we're happy to meet with you guys and go through this and understand the PPD. And as you said, it sounds like it may be a better solution. We just weren't expecting that and weren't prepared for that tonight. And so it's kind of something that it sounds like we need to maybe pause for a minute and go back and review.
We can do that, Todd. The thing I would like to do is, and I don't know if we've got the latest review of the financials available, but that clearly part of our driver for this is that we're hoping that the result of your efforts will generate some additional revenue into the general fund. And so we've got to, the council needs to see that because I think that's a give of sorts to the town, or take from the town. I don't know how to define give and take, who gets to give and who gets to take here, but it is a, it helps us to, it helps the council to feel, get clarity around what this is going to do for us from a financial standpoint, and what the implications are on the town from a financial standpoint. So yes, she's going to generate revenue, but it also requires the town to do additional things. So we have to have that little piece of analysis in front of us. And I know it's early days, but you guys have done enough of these, and there's enough data that that gets used in financial analysis for these kinds of projects. It says, okay, we can do a what happens, let's look at it at a 50% occupancy rate, 70% occupancy rate, 90% occupancy rate. Decide what's standard around this area and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's all standard numbers that most of the financial folks know. So we know what to use as sort of a baseline to say, since that with this kind of occupancy rate for these number of rooms, for these number of turns, at these rental rates, give or take. Again, we can use the regional averages and say this, you're going to generate $2 million a year into your general plan, and and we can do it from the operations side and come back and say, okay, for us to have the staffing and clear the roads and blah blah blah, we need, the town will incur $500,000 a year, so we net out X. And so that's a key piece of this, because I know it's early days, but we're basically trying to give a yes to a plan that's going to deliver some things for the town besides mixed use housing and so forth. But really what we care about is what are the revenue implications and what are the cost implications as well. So we got to get those in front of the council. And I don't know if we have them tonight, but if we do, we can pop them up. If not, we can put them up on next Thursday.
Yeah, and Mayor and Todd, so the numbers I saw were in PDF format. I tell you, I really, I'm a numbers person and I'm a detail person. So I'd like to see the spreadsheet plus in the big figures. How did you get to that math? How did you get to that number? So if you multiplied a number of mills times value and you came up with that, what is, so those are actually and one of them was like 51 million. over a period of time. So I need to know the math. So usually that's in a macro in a spreadsheet. So if you did that, give me the raw spreadsheet and the raw and kind of your raw macro on that.
No problem, Ralph. We can provide all that so you can dig into that, and we're happy to sit down with you individually and walk through the formulas behind it as well.
Yeah, I don't mean to be a pain in the butt, but
No,
you know,
not at all. No,
we just
not
want
at
to
all.
make sure we just want to make sure that we're accurate, and the numbers are the
no problem
numbers.
at all.
You know, that's the reality of the world.
No problem at
No,
all.
we-
We have no problem with that.
Ralph, that's exactly what we're getting at is we got to understand what's going on for us from a revenue and cost side to be able to make a holistic decision.
Yeah, and the spreadsheet was more like a projection, and so that's great. You know, I mean, that's a good preliminary, but we really need to make sure we're understanding of, especially the big numbers that are in there. How was that formulated so that we're in agreement that we know, you know, this is where that came from, so to speak, and that's a big piece of analyzing anything. Anyway, thank you, Todd. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Ralph.
I have a quick question about the hotel that I forgot to ask the other day when we were there. Is it going to be an actual hotel run by, say, a name brand, or is it sold as a condotel like Black Rock?
All of the hotels in Park City are condotels. I mean, from Stein Eriksen to Hotel Park City to, I mean, you name it, they all are a condotel, but they get run. I think maybe the question is, will it will it have a flag or not?
No, I'm just wondering if they were actually going to be sold as condos.
They'll be sold as condos, but run as a hotel in the same way that like Stein or the Montage or St. Regis is.
I was just curious about that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's a good question because there is a you know, it's a hard thing to, I guess, kind of understand sometimes, but yeah, it would be operated in the exact same way as any one of those other hotels.
Because it does affect the different property taxes, and some people actually live there and don't rent them out. So.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. And just to add to that, we do anticipate that it will be flagged by one of the major brands. So the conversations we're having with different hoteliers would indicate that it'll be one of those major brands that we would anticipate.
Okay, great.
But that, you know, the assumptions around which ones are, you know, basically really hotel room night kind of things, and which ones are private residence. Again, that affects the economics analysis. So that, you know, we need to get all that stuff in as we think about the economics. So this is a public hearing, and there have been some hands up, but you know, I've been holding off because the council's been talking. I want to know from I guess from the standpoint of Todd and Mac, and then from Polly, are we at the point where should we take some input? Should we continue the hearing? Where are we? Or is there more for us to talk about tonight, or have we set the have we sort of set the goals for the next time we chat?
I think oh, sorry, go ahead, Polly.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, maybe it'd be a good idea to continue it. And it's totally up to you, Mr. Mayor, and to Polly. I don't know that Todd and I certainly didn't come into this meeting anticipating that we were going to have even a vote today. We just wanted to have a thoughtful conversation about what we need to do going forward. And so I think Todd and I have a pretty clear understanding of what some of the documents that we need to provide. I've made pretty copious notes of the things that we need to come up with. And I think we've got to sit down with some of the staff and understand immediately what the PPD is and figure out if that's a mechanism that can work. And I think that if we understand that and have a discussion about, does it work better to do it this way, or does it work better to do it the other way? I think that we probably need to have that discussion, and we can come back and pick up where we left off. I don't know, Todd or Polly, I don't know if you have any feelings otherwise.
I have a different angle, and I'd be curious what Thomas thinks and the council. But the problem is because we're going at warp speed, we don't have that many other opportunities to meet and discuss things. So I would think we definitely want input that's going to help us, craft whatever we put together moving forward. I know there's a lot on our plate right now, but I don't think we have a choice but to heap it on, because if we're going to move this forward within the next 3 weeks, we've got to go in warp speed too. There are a lot of things that the Planning Commission brought up that haven't been discussed at all tonight. Parking was a big one that was brought up. There are a lot of others. So it would be good to kind of just know where council is on some of that to help the developers and staff as we're moving forward to craft stuff. I don't know, Thomas, what you think, or the mayor.
I'm not sure I understand what you're saying, Polly. I'm sorry. You're saying is there more content that Thomas has that we haven't reviewed? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think if we have the opportunity to get council input or public input or just direction, or people, our council members comfortable with the direction that we're going. There were some pretty specific recommendations from Planning Commission. Are we generally moving forward in that direction? Is there anything we need to look at differently?
Do you want to highlight, Thomas, for them what those were, what some of those action items were?
Yeah, I mean, if they're not in what's in this package, then we're missing some content that the council needs to see. Because if there's output from the Planning Commission that isn't in this package, this is what the council has seen, this package.
Yep, no, it's everything in the package, everything with regard to, again, the densities, the commercial development, the underpass, the slopes, disturbed open space, undisturbed areas. Are we good with?
Where's the parking and stuff that Polly is referring to, I guess is what I'm asking.
That would be in the conditions, because we didn't have a parking plan yet. So hang on. That would be at the end of.
Kind of got off track partway down your document, so I don't know if I'm saying if there's more we should talk about, we should do that.
So right there where you go to your concept plan, if you can go down just a little bit further. I think it's the last bullet point. We don't have a parking plan. It's a concept plan. And so does council have any recommendations with regard to a number of spaces for visitor parking, a percent, locations? How do they want some of these areas to be parked? I think Todd and McKay, I think you were talking about underground parking for the hotel.
We actually have a parking exhibit that we put together. It's just not developed to the point where we were going to share it tonight. I mean, we can get it over to you within days. And basically, and again, this goes back to our discussions on the code. I mean, we just have followed the code, the existing code on each one of our uses. And like, to give you an idea for the condos, I want to say that the basically what we plan on doing with the condos is have one stall that's an underground parking for each one of the condo buildings, and we'd probably have a quarter to a half a stall. I know it doesn't make sense, but that's the way the code is written. It's 1.5 to 1.25 stalls per unit, and those would be surface parked. And so we'll have a comprehensive plan that we could put together that shows how we would, in effect, we just follow the code on parking, right? That's all we're saying. We're just going to follow the code on parking, and we can show you and again, typically that's something you don't show until we get to a plat. Like, we just submit our plat and we follow the code based on what that is, and it all works itself out through that process. But we're more than happy to show you, for example, where's the commercial parking? If you actually want to see it on there, we can show exactly where, we're showing exactly where the commercial is parked and that sort of thing. Todd and I can provide that.
So Polly, can you help me clarify? You said keep it on. I don't quite know what you mean. I wasn't planning to take it off.
No. I mean, I guess I wanted to say, I think any input on this is good. And input on some of those items from the Planning Commission that Thomas outlined. would probably be helpful. Ultimately,
If
it's
the
the
plan-
council
there are
that's-
planning commission, there are planning commissioners on, that's fine.
No, I think you're missing the point, Mayor. I think Polly wants the council to express their support or not support of the planning commission's recommendations, so that we've had that discussion and there are no, that's further input into, the hard work that everyone has to do in the next 3 weeks. I can say for myself, I support everything the planning commission has, recommended. And those items that they brought up, I mean, they're very experienced. They know what it's like to live here. We've had challenges with snow removal and parking and snow storage and parking and trail access and all that stuff. And so, I fully support their input and as presented by Thomas tonight and, written in this report. So I just want to express myself that you've got to consider those things when you guys are going to have that discussion about potentially going with that PPD overlay. And so, yeah, I'm just saying that I'm supporting all those recommendations.
I support those recommendations too. I think they're very thoughtful. And I don't see any issues with those.
Yeah, I'm aboard as well. As as a former member of the Planning Commission, I think they did a really good job. They looked at this a couple of times. I tried listening to the video today, but I couldn't get through 3 hours of it, so to speak. So, but they asked some good questions. I was on a previous meeting. They asked some good questions. So yeah, I'm supportive of that. I don't think they were all that restrictive here anyway, to be very honest with you. I think their concerns actually didn't come out with a ton of restrictions here, but that was my preliminary analysis of this. And the other thought I had was, have we had enough town input into this? I mean, at some point, it is an open meeting, so we'd love to hear some other folks who do jump in, but I'll leave that for another thought, so to speak. But yeah,
It's a public hearing, Ralph, so there will be an opportunity for people to speak. I'm just getting through the council comments first.
Yeah,
Okay,
well, I mean, and that's just general. Go ahead, Carol, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that I also support the planning commission's recommendations. So it looks like those town council members that are here are all in favor of that. So. That's all.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Polly, are you comfortable that I can now open public input?
Yes.
So open for public input. The way you do that is by raising your hand. There's a little menu bar on the edge of your Zoom screen that allows you to do that. It has things like mute and video mute and things like that on the bottom of the bar, one of which is raise hand. And then I'm going to call on, I have 2 hands up. So the first one is Brett Rutter. So Brett, I'm going to let you unmute here. I think you can go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Rubin. Can you hear me? I just want to make sure it's okay.
Yes, sir. Okay.
All right. Well, I do appreciate it. I attended the Planning Commission's last meeting as well, and I've got a few comments here. I'll try to be as brief as I can and move through them rather quickly for the time's sake. Earlier here, I do appreciate, several of the council members asking for town's input. It appeared that maybe the developer, and I don't know names, I apologize, but the individual identified by Max iPhone 6 wasn't real interested in hearing town input, but that was just maybe my interpretation of his wanting to continue and not take town input. I think first and foremost, I echo Mr. Severini's and Rubin's comments about needing a thorough financial analysis that focuses on the net tax revenue projections to the town's general fund, not just the gross tax. In the Planning Commission meeting, the developers were focused on gross, but there's a lot of costs that are going to come with maintaining this significant addition to the town. So I think it's important to focus on net tax revenue to the town. I haven't heard any discussion of that. And I think the documents that they were talking about that Mr. Severini was asking for should also be made public so that others can analyze those as well and pose questions. I asked the Planning Commission to focus on that, and they seem to move past that and make the recommendation despite not having good financial info on a net tax proposal. The from my estimation at that Planning Commission meeting, the net tax numbers came out to be, with estimated growth increase over the next couple of years in the town to about 2,000 people. That net tax number came out to be about $300 a head. And I personally would much rather pay $300 directly into the general fund than increase the number of units by 600, nearly 600 ERUs in the town, and all of the costs and expenses and other things that come with increasing density. That's my personal perspective there, especially given that we're still moving towards that 20,000, general Jordanelle area units. I'm not sure that we need to necessarily add, another 400 to 600 units and not get anything significant for it, considering it's going to bring a lot more traffic, especially having a hotel, which is incredibly high density. And if the tax numbers project that hotel being at, reasonably high capacity of 70-80%, think about the traffic that's going to bring of tourists coming and going from that hotel multiple times a day, not just in the morning and evening when they go to work and come home. That was my point number one. Point number two, the developers seem to keep talking about how many units are in the hotel and the big house condos, but it still results in 4.3 units per acre, excluding the hotel and big house condos. So I think that's still a very significant increase. I don't want that to be downplayed on the density increase, because the comment's been made multiple times that they want us to remember that many of the units, 120 units or something, is in the hotel. I think the location of this really, I don't know that it's going to be great for retail. It's a half mile uphill, a 200 vertical foot climb. So this isn't a hill that a lot of people are going to be riding their bikes up to or walking up to from the town. And that's just from the highway, let alone if there's an underpass, you're probably talking about a 250 foot climb up that hill to go get a cup of coffee. It's going to result in more vehicle traffic to get up there, not more foot and bike traffic for many of the people in the town, I think. So I think taking that into consideration as well. That's about the same distance and climb of walking or riding your bike from the bottom of Reflection Ridge up to the roundabout for comparison in the town, which is a fairly steep climb for many. I'm concerned about parking. I know we haven't seen the parking plan, but just for the hotel, excluding the condos, because I know that they've talked that parking will be underground underneath them. You're looking at about 1.5 acres to 2 acres to have adequate parking for hotel guests as well as visitors coming to the hotel. The Black Rock Hotel is already having problems with parking when patrons of the hotel's overnight stay facility are coming there to eat or drink in their bar and restaurant. They've got a lot of parking problems at the Black Rock already and not having enough parking capacity. So it's not just the number of units, but it's also the visitors to that. I think is a significant concern. If they do underground parking under the hotel, maybe that would help mitigate that. But from the concept plan, I'm not seeing nearly enough parking close enough to the hotel to make that convenient and desirable. My next point is, focuses on the Hideout January 2019 plan. Figure 3.2 in that plan shows a very specific Post-it note, literally stuck right where this property is. For the proposed location of this development in the existing residential house. And it says, quote, lower density on it. And another nearby Post-it says preserve wild spaces, not preserve open spaces, but preserve wild spaces. And so wild spaces are very different than mass grading open space. And so I hope that the town takes a close look at that 2019 plan. Section 4.4.1 of that same plan, the public input calls for a few items I'll list here. Less density and more wilderness. Residents don't want commercial to intermingle or be anywhere near housing. Residents do not want a hotel near them. There is already too much high density. Stop oversaturation limit and slow down development. Those are all direct comments from public feedback in section 4.4.1 of the 2019 Hideout plan that hopefully council members will take a moment to reflect back on that and look at that as public focus input. I think that we need development in some manner to increase our tax base. Maybe this is a good opportunity for an assisted living space. It doesn't have near the traffic with assisted living that hotels do. You still end up with a taxable business. You have great views up there. I mean, if as I think of my aging parents, that would be a wonderful place to sit out and enjoy the views and be places. Just a thought, considering that was also a desired type of space that was talked about in the 2019 plan and also talked significantly about in the Richardson Flat annexation of having assisted living or senior housing. So maybe that's a better use of the space for the town. May not be for the developers, but for the town, that may be a better use of the space and not come with necessarily the increased traffic and congestion and things. My next point is that I think there are many areas that don't need to be rezoned if the town does proceed with this. And I think this was talked a little bit about with what Polly was talking about. But I look at the rainbow, I call it the rainbow graphic that has the 4 areas kind of painted in broad colors. And I think about what happened in Hideout here, where many areas of what were the golf course are zoned single family, particularly hole number 2 in Glistening Ridge. There's no reason the golf course is at hole number 2 is zoned single family. That should have been a donut shape, but it wasn't. So on this map that I think somebody brought up here, there's a lot of areas within, I think it's the villas and casitas, that whole inner circle, all the way up to where the buildings would be built, could be kept at a open space zoning requirement. Lots of spaces could be open space requirements so that nobody can ever come back in and propose that it was intended to be zoned or was zoned something else. And maybe that, I think it was called a PPD or PDD, might resolve that. But if it does move forward, I would say really isolate these places and locations so we don't end up with another Glistening Ridge problem where Mr. Martino was threatening to or insinuating that homes could be put on hole number 2. Near the end of the discussion, again, the gentleman identified by Mac's iPhone 6 was talking about stating maximum of 577 ERUs. I think that it must be allocated to the stated amounts. Again, this is only if the council proceeds, which I don't think they should, based on the limited information we have now and for the points articulated earlier. But if they do, I think we've got to be very careful to keep a lot of those units, those ERUs or units, or both as they're described, in the hotel and in these condos to preserve the wild space and not allow it to even be mass graded open space, but keep it wild space and keep that density confined to as few of structures as possible. Even having the 577 ERU limitation that was talked about could allow them to build those in roughly 285 single family lots if they wanted to. So I think it's really important to keep that density confined. I mean, the hotel itself is really the only significant benefit the town is getting from a tax revenue base. So it's critically important that there is a tax generating base limitation in any kind of agreement. So thank you for listening. I know I went through it quickly. I'm happy to talk with any council members or others that have questions as a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Reuter. Really appreciate it. Some very good thoughts there that we will certainly. I like the additional impact of looking at the financials as a per head impact. I think that's a great thought. The challenge on the more specific density of the zoning is a great thought. I mean, they're all good thoughts, but a lot of good stuff in there. So thank you for bringing those forward. Next one is Carol Thomas. So you're free to speak now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Town Council. I just would like to comment that I completely agree with all of the comments that Mr. Brett Reuter had to say. very concerned about the density and the necessity of an additional hotel in the area. Also, I agree with Polly with her comments that we need to take a little bit more time to really decide what is appropriate for the rezoning. And I certainly appreciate everyone's input, and just would like just to take a little bit further review across the board to what we're going to put for additional housing and development in the town of Hideout. Thank you.
Thank you. I am not seeing any more hands at this particular moment. So I will close public input at this time. We are going to continue the hearing because of all the items that we talked about. So there'll be another opportunity for further public input in the future. Does it make sense to talk about the NDA since we just got it today and none of us have read it? Except maybe you, Polly, because you've got some comments. There's some things you want to talk about on that and share with the council. I don't want to keep you from having a chance to do that.
The only thing that I think is worth looking at, and I don't know if we should do it now or at the next meeting, but Thomas and I, and based on some of the input at Planning Commission, kind of threw in the kitchen sink a little bit in terms of things that the town might want to get as part of this. He brought some of them up before. So just take a look at section 2. I just tried to put them all in one place so that we could evaluate them. Some of it's like the underpass that was already discussed.
So when you talk about section 2, you're talking.
Keep going down. Yeah, this is section 2. Maybe it's, okay. Yeah. So I don't know if you keep going, scrolling down a little bit. There are just some bullet items that don't even have text. Keep going down. Phasing plan, obviously. Okay. Roads. So one question that I just kind of realized as we were talking tonight, we talked about whether some of the roads should stay private. I think if we do a PID, they probably have to be dedicated to the town. So we'll have to look at that, but that might take that idea of keeping the roads private off the table. There's a contribution for the underpass, just questions about, clearly designating parks, open space areas, what are the parks going to look like? We talked a little bit about that tonight. Trails, requiring a certain amount of commercial space. Thomas kind of had some suggestions that have been floated to planning. Talked about what the parking's going to look like, the idea of a town center or how that would look like. Affordable housing plan hasn't been discussed at all. So those were kind of the main ideas that were kind of talked about.
Has this been shared with the development team?
This.
Have they seen this yet?
No.
Yeah,
we haven't seen it.
Yeah, in the packet now, but we can send it to you and send it as a Word document if you'd like. Oh, and then also, I wasn't sure, and this is something obviously we have to talk to fire and the sheriff's office, but I don't know if 600 units tips the scale to having to have some kind of fire protection or not. I just was brainstorming to make sure we didn't forget anything because it might not be applicable. I just put that in there just in case. So those were the main ones. These were all, none of these should be coming out of left field though. They were all things that were discussed either in the prior version and or at the Planning Commission. And we do have language in there about the public infrastructure district. Because I know that was a big ask of the, request of the developers.
And well, thank you, Polly, for the work you did in trying to put something together for a straw for talking points. Very helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Polly.
Thank you, Polly. And in terms of do you mind if I chime in real quick?
Go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of a game plan going forward, Polly, if you could send that over to us, Todd and I will get our attorney and we can set up a meeting as quick as practically possible and go over all of that with you, as long as well as with any of the PPD discussion. I think most of the council members should understand what I meant when we say continue the meeting. It certainly does not preclude public option. It just, or opinion. It means that we're continuing the discussion to the next meeting when we have more materials to discuss and obviously give the public time to input, time to say what they need to say. So just to clarify, but if we can get that MDA and then set up, maybe Tuesday of next week, Thomas, Todd, myself, Polly, we can sit down and I think we just grind through that stuff, try to understand better what it is that you guys need, take all the planning commission's input, see if we can incorporate all that into our plan and give you guys a more detailed and descriptive, just give you the answers that you're looking for. I think that the burden is on us if I could do that.
Mr. Mayor, if I could make a request, I think this is probably the most important one of the night. For Mr. Rudder's sake, could we have McKay change the name of his screen name to something like Superhero or something, so at least we know what to call him? I think that would be beneficial for everybody. I think that should be a requirement in the meeting minutes.
I think the host has the power to do that. So
let's do it then. Let's do it.
I need to change. I certainly need to update my name. But my face is here though. That's, at least you have my face and you know who I am.
Unfortunately, not everybody in the meeting does. So okay, we'll get that straightened out.
No, it's my phone is what it is. It's my phone.
Oh, I love it.
Superhero one, can you send me an email with your guys' emails as well as your attorney's emails? Because when you're representing, I need to include him or her.
No problem. And it's Eric Robinson and Chase Nielsen over at Kurt McConkey, but we'll get you their information.
Okay, great.
It is definitely not Bruce, as someone mentioned. Well, Bruce is not our attorney.
Yeah, the MDA that was submitted was, I guess, lifted from another one that Bruce had done. So
it's just it's a template that's used.
It's just a form, yeah.
Yeah.
So we apologize for scaring everyone. Bruce is not involved and is not our attorney.
I would think he would have a conflict anyway.
Yeah.
No problem. No problem.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone.
So I have a hand up, even though I've closed public input. So, but since you've already spoken earlier, Brett, I'll go ahead and add your new comments.
Yeah, actually, I was just, I have not seen the MDA and it's not loaded in the agenda packet. So
it just came in, Brett. It has not been shared with anyone. It came in literally 2 minutes before the meeting.
We haven't seen it either, Brett.
Okay, well, I guess it was discussed and displayed. So can that be added to the agenda packet as an update?
It will be. Alicia will
be done at the end. We'll be done at the end of the
Thank you.
We just can't change what's in the public meeting database in the midst of
Yeah.
a meeting.
No, I understand. I understand. Thank you.
Okay. So council, what I am proposing is to continue this discussion to a date certain. The next one being the planned council meeting for the 10th of March. And I need to, if you're okay with that, then I'll need you to motion to continue.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Was that Sherry first?
No,
Chris.
Chris,
Chris? Okay. And the second was Carol.
Sherry.
Second was Sherry. Ah. Sorry. Ralph, you okay to continue?
Yeah, we're just continuing this to the 10th, which is our next meeting, right?
Yes.
Or, yeah, sounds good. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, Carol?
Yes, I'm okay with it, but please try to get the printed information to us a little bit earlier. I would appreciate that.
Yep. Sherry?
Yes.
Okay, and Chris?
Yes.
All right, so that we're going to continue the public hearing on the Boulders project to a date certain of 10 March, where we will bring as much of the requested information as possible, and then we'll go from there. Okay. Well, thank you, Todd and McKay, for being with us tonight and helping us with our questions and queries. Appreciate it.
We appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Thomas and Polly, for your all your hard work and bringing some thoughts together on this. It's a lot of work. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Good night.
Night, thank you.
So the meeting is not over, so don't everybody on the council leave yet anyway, please. Or it will be over and we'll have to do it next week. So let me share this back again. All right, so we have some agenda items. We want to talk about one. The first one here is, I think this was a carryover from the last meeting for bringing the other stuff in. We were going to get some additional numbers together as requested by Ralph on an hourly rate, stuff like that. I don't know. If Jan is on. I don't see her, so we may have to push that one to the next meeting. We have moved ahead as described at the last meeting, where we are working with Zion's on the water stuff right now. But I know Jan did the work on this, but she's not here to describe it, so we'll have to push that to the 10th. So I will put that down to do that. The next one, Polly, do you want that one is for you to talk about, if you don't mind?
So the last thing is a agreement related to impact fees, which are due to JSSD. And it's too bad Jan's not here because she could have explained some of this as well. But basically there was a deficit of impact fees that went through the town and needed to go to JSSD. There were mistakes made on JSSD's side, on the town side, maybe GCD's side as well, I don't know. But in any case, this kind of resolves it all. So we're splitting it in thirds. And this will allow that to happen. And JSSD is okay with it as well. It's a three-way contract. And so what it does is the impact fees that we're short on will be split 3 ways.
Does that mean we're contributing a third, a third, a third, a third? The
Yes.
Hideout
That's
is
what it
doing a
means,
third?
yes.
And actually,
Yes.
the way that this is written is, I shouldn't say that. JCD is paying a third. We've left it a little more open-ended so that we could work it out with, GCD is paying 1/3. But then it's left open how it allows for JSSD and the town to work out the remaining amount. But I think it's kind of contemplated that we will each pay a third, but that has not been written in stone at this point.
Oh, okay, and that's to strike a compromise position with GCD so that, you know, we're diminishing what we thought they owed for the
Correct.
reason mistakes being made.
And it reduces, so, right, because there was a lot of confusion over what they were due, and so we billed them for one amount, but they actually owed more. And so, and then there was a lag in us turning it over to JSSD and JSSD not keeping track either of it. So this is the least painful way, I think, to resolve this all.
Yeah, I mean, our belief is that, you know, if we can get to a third or less for our portion, that's great, because I think we would spend that on the legal chase if this ended up going down the legal path. So at this point, I think we just swallow it and move on.
And what's our,
Make the
what's our,
changes, we've made the changes in our process that we are no longer in the middle of JSSD impact fees. So anybody who wants to move forward with a project has to bring a letter from JSSD saying we are satisfied that our impact fees are covered. So we are no longer the handling party. We've gotten ourselves out of the middle.
so Mayor, what are we on the hook for? I thought I saw a number of 33,000 roughly, but is that correct?
Which Polly is saying that this agreement is between, it covers what GCD has to pay. We don't have that, which is news to me, I guess, that we were going to try and maybe work with JSSD a bit on this, but I think, Polly, we need to be clear that, we shouldn't exceed a third.
No,
Exactly.
I think that is
If we can make it less, because, we think they missed some stuff on their part as well, but I'd like to squeeze them, but at the end of the day, we shouldn't be saying, okay, we're going to pay the other two. That's not the deal we're talking about. So I don't know, do we need to change anything to be clear on that, or?
Yeah, maybe what we should do is authorize you to sign it with the condition that we add in a provision saying that the town will not pay more than the 33,645, that would be the maximum the town would contribute.
I think that would be, because that way JSSD would be signing off on the fact that they can't go after more. And then we can talk about why we think they're wrong, asking us for even that. But if we put in something like a not to exceed, I think that would be good. I think it would make the council and myself feel a lot better about signing this.
Yeah. So we can condition, the motion could be with that amendment to the agreement.
Other questions from council? Okay, so I need a motion to approve the mayor to sign an agreement related to the settlement of impact fees due to JSSD with the modification or the insertion of language that limits the town's portion to no more than the 1/3 amount. Or
Yeah, I'll make that
33,
Yeah.
33, whatever it was.
645.
Thank you, 33,640. There it is. Thank you, Ralph. Need a second?
I'll second. This is Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Okay. Carol?
Yes.
Thank you. Sherry?
Yes.
Thank you. Chris?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Thank you very much. All right, and by the way, that we've the team that's been working on this has done a really good job in getting our arms around all this madness. And as I said, the process has changed. There's like a few $1,000s in left for a couple of individual fees that have to be chased that we're working on. Otherwise, this all gets out of our books forever. So I'm glad for that.
Hey, Mayor,
so-
sorry to interrupt,
Yes.
but Jan's on the phone now, or Jan's back on the call. Do you want to address that first item?
Okay. These things don't work the way they're supposed to. I'm sorry. It's supposed to allow me to jump to that section of the document, but it doesn't. I don't know why it doesn't. My apologies. Either I'm using it wrong or we don't have it set up right. We'll have to look at that. Actually, there's no documents for that because we don't have it. So Jan, I'll go back to the agenda then. If Jan's on, there was some homework that you were going to do, Jan, regarding the hourly rate and some of those other pieces as far as doing the other portion of the economic study beyond the water piece.
Right.
I don't know if you've got an update on that.
I spoke with Susie after our meeting and she agreed to meet or beat the other rates. We talked about a blended hourly rate. She's given me rates that are slightly lower than our other proposal. Yep. So probably rewrote this item on the agenda, and I think it's a good way to word it because as we work with Ryan, we have some of the information. So just to have a cap on fees, I think is a wise way to go.
So is there a new proposal that we can look at?
It's all in my email. If we want her to reduce it to a formal proposal, she's happy to do that.
Council, how do you feel about that?
As I recall, last time we had two proposals. One of them had an hourly rate, the other one didn't. Jan, you're saying you got the hourly rate from Zion's and it's a little bit lower than the original. My question is, didn't we already authorize this? So, didn't the water study already start? And is there an
Yes.
overlap here?
Yep.
We have started
So
the
we have
new
water.
water study.
Yeah, the water is started. So this would be, if we were to agree to allow the mayor to enter into contract, it would be For the other elements, or all of this, including the water, the total of which is not to exceed 30,000. But Jan, last time you talked about doing some of this with the other, you wanted to use both vendors, one for a portion of it, one for another portion of it. So can you address that?
Actually, it's a different issue. I would like to use Lewis Young to continue our studies on the MIDA formulas, the nightly rental formulas. I'd like to keep Zion's working on the rate studies, and that way we can utilize both firms most efficiently.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And Jan, I think I remember going, in the last meeting talking about this. Are we comfortable? I think that I can't remember which firm did not give us the hourly versus the, the more like the fixed fee. So are we comfortable that the rates are equivalent? And so that's really where I was going on that thought process. So
Yes, Susie and I went over that. We looked at the competitors' rates. She agreed. We categorized her labor force and talked about, you had brought up a blended hourly rate not to exceed a certain amount, and she agreed to that rate or lower.
Good. So Mayor, are we voting on something here?
Yes, basically, I'm asking for a motion to authorize the mayor to enter into a contract for the overall economic study, which includes the water, which we've already started, as well as these other elements, with Zion's not to exceed 30,000.
Well, I'll make a motion for that if you're asking for a motion.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Thank
That's
you,
Carol.
I got it right this time. Okay. Sherry, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Chris?
I'd like to just disclose that I work for Zions Bank. And Polly, does that mean I should abstain, or is disclosure enough for me to render a vote?
Will you be financially impacted by this contract?
No, I will
Then
not be financially impacted.
Disclosure's enough.
Okay, thank you. All right, then I'll vote yes.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for doing that. I appreciate it very much. But Polly, that as a reminder, with that email I sent you today, that's part of what we need to get finished up. Okay.
Yeah.
Carol?
Yes.
Thank you, Ralph.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, council. I appreciate that. This is going to be critical to everything we've been working on, including what we were just working on earlier tonight, making sure we understand our cost structures well enough to be able to look at this proposed development and say, based on what we've learned from all this, we're going to need, the town's going to have to invest X amount annually to maintain the infrastructure. So it's going to be helpful. All right. I appreciate everyone's taking the time to grab an extra meeting this month. I do appreciate that. But it's now time to let you go. So I need a motion to close the meeting and move to back to our lives. Anybody want to close the meeting?
So moved. This is great. We're all going to so move this.
Yes.
Okay, so if I'm going to say Chris and Ralph as the second.
Yep.
And
Or
then
third.
all in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
I.
Okay, I heard all four. Thank you. Meeting is closed. Thank you all, and appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank
Okay.
you. Good night.
Okay,
Take care.
all right.
Bye,
Good
everybody.
night.
Good night.